With Mavuika's kit details finally revealed, the community is buzzing with speculations. Does she power creep Xiangling? How does her kit really work and is she worth pulling? I will break it all down for you in this video. Hey there, today we'll be diving into Mavuika, the Pyro Archon's kit, her potential synergies and her role in Genshin Impact's meta. And now, let's get started. Mavuika is a 5-star Pyro Claymore wielder, who would have guessed? Much like Raiden Shogun, she features a hybrid playstyle functioning as either a support or a on-field main DPS depending on your needs. Her kit is built around her Night Soul points, a resource that fuels her skill and burst mechanic. Her elemental skill has two variations, tap and hold. Tapping her skill summons fire rings that track and attack enemies every 2 seconds. While it's not as much pyro application as expected, it is still a consistent source of AoE pyro damage. However, this lower application might make some teams impractical, though some tweaks like reducing the intervals or removing its ICD could improve this. But with the hold variant, things get wild. Mavuika hops on a motorcycle, converting her normal, charged and plunging attacks into motorcycle attacks. Yes, you can literally run enemies over for pyro damage. It's chaotic but surprisingly effective for AoE control. Both skill variants rely on Night Soul points and she gains 80 Night Soul points, that is her maximum limit, which depletes over time while she is on the field. Her skill cooldown is 15 seconds, so you can expect a full uptime longer than a C6 Xiangling. And as an on-field DPS, Mavuika can rival or even surpass some of the top tier units in raw damage. Reputable theory crafters suggest that her AoE and self-sustained capabilities makes her a standout choice for many team compositions. Even without energy investment, she can output DPS comparable to a Venet buffed Xiangling, which is nuts for an off-field unit. Now about Mavuika's elemental burst. First of all, it costs no energy. Instead, her elemental burst uses Fighting Spirit, a unique mechanic generated through Night Soul point consumption or normal attack. Reaching 100 Fighting Spirit lets her use her elemental burst, dealing initial AoE pyro damage while restoring 10 Night Soul points and entering an enhanced burst state that lasts for 7 seconds, which is called the Crucible of Death and Life. This form increases her damage, resists interruption and removes Night Soul point consumption. And while she is in this state, all of her attacks will get a damage increase based on the Fighting Spirit consumed, and as a bonus, her Essential 4 passive grants her or any active character a damage buff based on Fighting Spirit up to 50%, which decays over time from the time of burst activation. Her burst has an 18-second cooldown, which aligns with rotation slightly shorter than Xiangling. Mavuika also shines as a flex spot, buffing teammates and dishing out damage without demanding much field time. She can skill, burst and swap out. No Raiden style field time issues here, but generating Fighting Spirit might sound tricky, but with proper team building, it's manageable. Most characters can generate enough Fighting Spirit naturally during their rotations, especially if you include a Natlan teammate, those who consume Night Soul points. So Fighting Spirit is generated when any character consumes Night Soul points or uses their normal attacks, but she will gain 1 Fighting Spirit for consuming 1 Night Soul point and 1.5 Fighting Spirit for using normal attacks. For example, Shilonen with her skill and 2 normal attacks generate 90 Fighting Spirit, and with Mavuika's contribution, that's 170 Fighting Spirit per rotation, while Molali can consume up to 100 Night Soul points, totaling 180 Fighting Spirit. And even teams without Natlan units can work if they rely on characters with high normal attack frequency. Mavuika fits seamlessly into teams using characters like Riot's Lee, Arataki Ito or Saino, making her an incredibly versatile unit. So Mavuika is an exceptional off-field pyro unit with potential to rival existing meta staples. She brings reliable damage, unique utility and flexibility without hogging much field time or energy. But before diving into Mavuika's team building potential, let's address something crucial. There's no new artifact set in version 5.3. This is a major issue because Mavuika's kit doesn't synergize well with most existing artifact sets. For example, her elemental burst does not consume Night Soul points, making the Obsidian Codex set awkward. Even if you use her skill before bursting, its buff duration doesn't align fully with her elemental burst damage window. This makes it clunky for DPS Mavuika builds. On the other hand, the Scroll of the Cinder City set, while amazing for both her damage and support, does not interact with her kit's unique mechanics. Yet, because the 4-piece set effect is so broken, it's still her best option. However, the scroll set introduces another problem: competition. Key Natlan characters like Shilonen, Kachina and Ororon are already using this set. Given Mavuika's high off-field damage and buffing potential, it might be better to let those characters use scroll set, while Mavuika equips a more damage-oriented setup like 2-piece Obsidian Codex plus 2-piece Golden Troop. And now let's talk about teams. Starting with Molani teams, Mavuika introduces some awkward dynamics. Her slow pyro application once every 2 seconds makes stable vaporize setups tricky, and if you pair her with high hydro application units like Xingqiu or Yelan in vaporized team, they will very quickly override the pyro aura from the enemies. That said, Xiangling's Pyronado can smooth things out as it adds consistent pyro application, making these teams more accessible. And for burn wave setups, Mavuika's team might struggle to maintain a pyro scroll buff after the first rotation, especially when paired with units like Kazuha or Sucrose who rely heavily on pyro infused swords for buffing. Xiangling still seems like the more reliable option for most Molani teams, as Mavuika's slow pyro application and the scroll competition create some synergy issues. But one team where Mavuika shines difference is skin each teams. Mavuika provides better uptime and more consistent damage than Xiangling, while also offering a full scroll buff for Kinech's rotation. You will likely run Deepwood Memories on Emily to adapt, which isn't too big of a sacrifice given the set's overall strength. As for burning focus teams with characters like Nahida, Mavuika does offer high uptime and solid support, but pure burning setups face scroll buff issues when fighting a single target enemy. Once an enemy is burning, you can't re-trigger the effect unless new enemies spawn. As for Tartaglia teams, Mavuika doesn't bring much to the table. She won't replace Bennett in these setups, and doubling up on pyro buffs doesn't provide significant benefits. Xiangling and other versatile supports will likely remain the preferred options here. Lastly, Navia teams are another strong use case for Mavuika. Her off-field damage rivals Xiangling's without interfering with Bennett's field time, allowing for better Navia setups overall. So Mavuika's versatility as an off-field unit makes her a strong option, but her lack of defensive utilities like interruption resistance or damage reduction for allies limits her supporting potential. She feels like a hybrid unit that tries to balance damage and support but doesn't excel at either compared to more specialized character. Her slower pyro application also complicates many team comps, especially with Moalani or reaction heavy setups. While she works well as a mono pyro option or in off-field burn/wave teams, the lack of synergy with current artifact set hurts her kit's overall fluidity, and it feels like they tried to make her a high damage pyro unit, especially when she is both a top tier off-field DPS and a viable support. Her playstyle is straightforward and she avoids common issues like high energy requirements, but it would have been great to see her lean more into utility rather than raw damage.